Before we go any further, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps powerful life stories reach more people. It was 7:15 a.m. The corridors of Mendez University were still echoing with the hush of dawn when Amanda pressed her palm against the cold glass of room 304. 7 months pregnant, breath steady, uniform a size too tight, she moved with quiet precision, the kind you only learn when life doesn't let you waste a step. The room smelled of chalk dust and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights hummed like distant bees. She wrung the cloth once, twice. The blackboard stared back, crowded with white scars of yesterday's brilliance. But there, centered like a dare, an equation remained. Symbols braided with Greek letters, exponents balancing like acrobats on a wire. Amanda's hand hovered. Memory, long buried, began to rise like a tide. For a heartbeat, she wasn't a janitor. She was the student who once owned this silence, the girl professors waited on, the mind that refused to blink. The cloth touched slate. A single stroke erased a line of chalk. Another breath, another stroke. The equation stayed. Amanda stilled. In the reflection of the board, she could see herself. Tired eyes, a ponytail that wouldn't quite behave, a softness at her belly that meant love and risk, and an entire future. The old language in her head, half math, half music, woke up, clear as a bell. She traced the first variable in the air, a ghost of who she used to be. A heel clicked in the hallway, voices swelled. The day was about to arrive with all its noise and judgment. Amanda placed the cloth on the tray, squared her shoulders, and faced the board. No longer erasing, but reading. Amanda bent down to pick up the bucket, the weight pulling at her swollen back. Every step felt like she was carrying two lives. Her own, bruised and tired, and the fragile one inside her, waiting for a chance to bloom. She kept her head low, as if hiding could protect her from the world's sharp edges. The university hallways were lined with polished marble, golden plaques and portraits of wealthy donors, people who would never know what it meant to scrub floors before sunrise. Every detail screamed of power and privilege, and Amanda's footsteps whispered the opposite: invisibility. She had been cleaning since 5 in the morning, dragging her weary body from one classroom to another. The sting in her hands came not just from chemicals, but from the truth she had learned the hard way. Dreams, once broken, rarely get pieced back together. Still, she fought the urge to crumble. Her heart pounded faster than her pace. Every student who walked past her seemed to carry a future carved in gold. They didn't look at her, not really. To them, she was part of the background, blue uniform, mop in hand, faceless. Amanda had mastered the art of silence, swallowing pride, hiding pain, and clinging to the tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, this job was a stepping stone, not a prison. As she returned to room 304, she let her hand linger on the desk closest to the blackboard, the desk where she once sat, answering questions no one else dared. Her fingertips trembled, but she quickly pulled them away, afraid someone might see the truth in that small gesture. She straightened, wiped her brow, and whispered to herself, "Just get through today. One day at a time." At that moment, a shadow darkened the doorway. Heavy footsteps, a presence that made the air grow colder. "Still here?" The voice was sharp, slicing through the room like a blade. Amanda froze, her cloth mid-air. Slowly she turned, her stomach tightening harder than the child within her. Rodrigo Mendez, professor, heir, and owner of the university, stood tall at the door. His suit shimmered with wealth, his tie alone worth more than Amanda's monthly salary. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked on her swollen belly. "You take too long for something so simple," he muttered, tossing his leather briefcase onto the desk with unnecessary force. The thud echoed across the classroom, carrying the weight of his disdain. "My class starts in 20 minutes, and the smell of your cleaning products still lingers." Amanda lowered her gaze, voice trembling. "I'll finish quickly, Professor." But Rodrigo's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. "Wait. You're pregnant." 7 months of sacrifice, pain, and silent courage condensed into a single nod. Rodrigo laughed, a cruel, hollow laugh that stripped the room of its air. And who's the father? Another janitor? Or did you even bother to find out? Amanda felt her chest burn. She wanted to disappear, but she stood rooted, clutching the rag until her knuckles turned white. The words pierced deeper than any knife. Words meant not to question, but to wound. And let me guess, Rodrigo sneered. How you probably never even finished high school, did you? Amanda's lips parted, but the voice that emerged was soft, steady, and defiant. I studied here, Professor, in this very university. The laugh that followed was louder, sharper, and filled with mockery. You? A pregnant janitor cleaning my classroom studied medicine here? Amanda swallowed the knot in her throat, but her eyes didn't waver. 4 years, Professor. I completed 4 years of medical school. The laughter stopped. Rodrigo's smirk lingered, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else. Confusion, disbelief, maybe even fear. Rodrigo tilted his head back, his laughter booming once more, this time crueler, echoing against the bare walls of room 304. Medicine? You? Don't insult me. His words dripped with venom. You can't even clean a blackboard properly, and you expect me to believe you studied medicine in my university. Amanda's fingers tightened around the cloth, but her voice carried quiet strength. I did, Professor. 4 years. I only left in the 5th. Rodrigo's smirk widened as he leaned against the desk. Let me guess. You got pregnant, dropped out, and ended up right where you belong. A tragic cliché. Each word landed like a punch to her chest, but Amanda held her ground. She had endured worse: loneliness, betrayal, hunger for opportunity. If she could survive all that, she could survive his scorn. Actually, she said, lifting her chin just slightly, I studied physics, chemistry, anatomy, nuclear medicine. I even published an article once. For the first time, Rodrigo's smile faltered. He wasn't alone anymore. Dr. Carlos, professor of anatomy, had paused by the open door, listening. His brow furrowed as recognition flickered across his face. Moments later, Dr. Helena from physiology joined him, drawn by the raised voices. What article? Dr. Carlos asked cautiously. Amanda's voice softened, but her words landed like thunder. On radioactive dosages in nuclear medicine, it was cited internationally. The silence that followed was heavy. Helena's eyes widened. Wait, Amanda Silva? Amanda nodded, quietly but firmly. The professors exchanged glances, shock spreading across their faces. Memories resurfaced. The brilliant student who once outshined entire classes, the girl who had disappeared without explanation. Meanwhile, Rodrigo's arrogance cracked. His laughter no longer seemed certain. Instead, doubt crawled into his eyes as he looked at the woman he had dismissed as nothing. Rodrigo pushed himself off the desk, straightening his suit as if to shake off the sudden unease in the room. His voice rose, dripping with sarcasm, echoing through the corridor. So you claim to be this prodigy, fine, then prove it. He pointed toward the chalkboard, where the dense equation still glowed white under the fluorescent lights. This problem defeated my top students yesterday. 2 hours and none of them even came close. If you really studied here, if you really were who you say you are, then solve it. Amanda's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She glanced at the symbols on the board, old friends disguised as enemies, and then back at Rodrigo. And what happens if I do? She asked. Rodrigo's smirk sharpened into a challenge. I'll make it interesting. Solve it correctly, and I'll give you 3 million reais. Enough to buy your dignity back, right? The number crashed into the silence like a thunderclap. 3 million. Enough to change her life forever. Enough to secure her unborn child's future. Enough to undo 16 years of pain. Dr. Carlos stepped into the doorway, his face pale. Rodrigo, are you serious? Completely serious, Rodrigo replied, arrogance swelling in his chest. He wanted witnesses. He wanted her humiliation etched into every corner of the university. More professors gathered, whispers flooding the hall. Helena crossed her arms, eyes locked on Amanda. Do you really want to do this? She asked softly. Amanda looked at the equation one more time. Her fingers trembled, but not with fear, only with the weight of a decision long overdue. She wiped her palms against her uniform, then lifted her gaze to meet Rodrigo's. "I accept," she said clearly. 3 million reais if I solve it, and everyone here will be my witness." The room froze. Rodrigo's smirk twitched, faltering just enough for doubt to slip through. Rodrigo's voice grew louder, as though he wanted the whole corridor to hear. "Perfect. Everyone come closer. Our janitor is about to give us a lesson in quantum physics." His mockery was deliberate, sharpened to draw laughter. Within minutes, the doorway was crowded. Professors leaned in, assistants whispered, even a few early students stopped to peek, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Amanda stood in the center of it all, her belly rising and falling with every breath, her hands trembling just slightly at her sides. Dr. Carlos frowned, visibly uneasy. "Rodrigo, this isn't right." But Rodrigo only spread his arms. "Why not? If she claims to be a former student, what harm is there in proving it? Besides," his grin widened, "this will be entertaining." Amanda felt the sting of 100 eyes pressing against her, measuring her worth, waiting for her collapse. Her throat tightened, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not now. Helena stepped closer, her gaze softer than the others. "Amanda, you don't have to do this." "Yes, she does," Rodrigo snapped, cutting her off. "She brought this on herself with her lies. Now she either proves it or admits she's nothing more than what we see." The words burned, but Amanda raised her head. She turned to the crowd, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "If I succeed, let every one of you remember this moment. Not for the money, but for the truth of who I am." A hush swept over the room. Even Rodrigo blinked, caught off guard by the fire in her tone. With slow determination, Amanda reached for a piece of chalk. It felt cold, fragile, yet powerful between her fingers. For the first time in years, she wasn't cleaning the board. She was about to write on it. Amanda stood tall, the chalk trembling lightly between her fingers. Her voice was calm, but each word carried a weight that silenced the corridor. "Before I begin," she said, eyes fixed on Rodrigo, "do you remember a student named Amanda Silva? She studied here from 2018 to 2022. Rodrigo frowned, his confidence wavering. "The name sounds familiar, but no, I don't recall anyone like you." Dr. Carlos's eyes widened. "Wait, Amanda Silva?" His voice shook as he turned to Helena. "The prodigy? The girl who wrote the groundbreaking article on nuclear medicine dosage?" Helena gasped, her hand rising to cover her mouth. "Yes, she was the brightest student this university ever had. She disappeared in her final year." Amanda's gaze never faltered. She lifted her chin, her words slicing through the stunned silence. "I am that Amanda Silva." A ripple of disbelief swept the room, murmurs spread among the professors, whispers growing into recognition. Professor Jose, older and grayer now, stepped forward from the back of the crowd. His voice was low but firm. "It's true. I remember her. She was extraordinary. The kind of mind that comes once in a generation." Rodrigo's jaw clenched, his smirk erased, replaced by a pale mask of shock. He looked from Amanda to the others, searching for denial, for someone to break the spell of truth, but found only nods of confirmation. The janitor he had mocked, the woman he had humiliated, wasn't just anyone. She was the star his institution had once boasted of, the one who had outshone them all. Amanda tightened her grip on the chalk. Her voice steadied, ringing with both pain and pride. "I am the same Amanda Silva you all applauded years ago. The one you praised as brilliant, then abandoned when I needed help the most." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with shame, realization, and the weight of an entire institution's neglect. Amanda lowered her gaze for a moment, breathing deeply before speaking. Her voice no longer trembled. It carried the weight of truth. "I was the daughter of a maid," she began. "My mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses in the morning and offices at night, so I could study. She sacrificed everything to give me a chance to stand here, in this very place." Every word painted a picture of struggle and sacrifice, Professors who once prided themselves on academic excellence shifted uncomfortably, realizing how little they had seen of the lives behind their students' eyes. "I earned my place here," Amanda continued. "First in the entrance exam, first in every subject for 4 years. I had opportunities waiting abroad, Harvard, MIT, because of the research I published." Dr. Carlos nodded slowly, remembering. Helena's eyes glistened as she whispered, "It's true, I read that paper, it was revolutionary." Rodrigo, however, leaned against the desk, forcing a smile, though his face betrayed unease. "And yet, here you are, cleaning floors. What happened to the prodigy?" Amanda touched her belly, her voice softening. "Life happened, love happened. I met Miguel, a surgical resident 3 years older than me, intelligent, charming. I thought he was my future." The room grew still, the professors realizing this was no longer about equations. It was about a human story unraveling before their eyes. "When I discovered I was pregnant," Amanda said, her eyes burning with unshed tears, "he walked away. He told me to resolve the problem or he would leave. And when I chose my child over him, he abandoned me." Helena's hand tightened over her chest. Carlos whispered, "My God!" Amanda straightened, her voice sharpening now. "But that wasn't the end. Complications forced me into bed rest, hypertension, risk of premature birth. I begged the university for medical leave. I brought documents, proof, pleas. But because I was a scholarship student, the rules were clear. Miss more than 15 days, and you lose everything." She paused, her words cutting deeper than any chalk mark on the board. "And so I lost my scholarship, my dream, my future, all for daring to protect the life growing inside me." The crowd stood frozen, the weight of injustice settling heavy on their shoulders. Amanda's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady, each syllable cutting through the stunned silence. "When I told Miguel I was pregnant," she said, "I thought he would be happy. I thought we would build a future together, that all the long nights of study and sacrifice would finally have meaning." She shook her head slowly, the faintest trace of a bitter smile on her lips. "Instead, he told me I was ruining his career, that he wasn't ready to be a father. And then he gave me an ultimatum. Choose him or choose the child." Gasps rippled through the group of professors. Rodrigo's eyes flickered, his arrogance shrinking with every word. "I chose my child," Amanda continued firmly. "And in return, Miguel chose to abandon me. He spread lies, that I had trapped him, that the pregnancy was fake, that I was after his family's money. The same friends who once praised me turned their backs overnight." Dr. Helena pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking her head. "How could he?" Amanda's voice lowered, but its strength grew heavier. "It wasn't just Miguel who betrayed me. It was the system, the university I gave everything to, the institution that demanded perfection from me, but offered no compassion when I needed humanity the most." She paused, placing her hand on her stomach, feeling the faint movement of life within. "I lost my scholarship, my reputation, my future. Not because I lacked ability, but because I dared to be human. Because I chose love and responsibility over ambition." The professors exchanged uneasy glances, guilt pressing into their consciences. For the first time, Amanda's suffering was no longer invisible. It was undeniable, raw and heavy in the air. Rodrigo swallowed hard, the smirk on his lips now gone entirely. The man who had mocked her just moments before was beginning to realize he wasn't watching a janitor's confession. He was witnessing the collapse of his own arrogance. Amanda drew in a deep breath, her hand still resting protectively over her belly. Her voice carried both pain and pride. "When the university cut my scholarship, I tried everything to stay. I begged the administration. I showed medical reports. I promised to catch up, to take exams later. But the rules were iron, and for students like me, poor students, there were no exceptions." She looked toward the floor for a moment, as if gathering pieces of courage that had scattered years ago. Then she raised her chin, eyes burning with memory. "My mother sold everything she had to help me. Our furniture, her jewelry, even the little house we rented, gone. She worked until her hands bled, just to give me a chance to finish. But it still wasn't enough." The professors shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed at the cruelty of the very institution they served. Amanda's voice softened as she continued, "And when my daughter was born, everything changed. Her name is Sophia. She is 15 now, bright, brilliant, determined. She is the reason I keep breathing, the reason I endure humiliation, the reason I fight every single day." For a moment, her expression lightened, a flicker of warmth cutting through the heaviness. She is my greatest achievement. Not an article, not a scholarship, not the applause of professors. Her. She is my victory. The silence in the room grew heavier, not with mockery, but with respect. The weight of Amanda's sacrifices pressed against every witness, reminding them that brilliance was not limited to classrooms and degrees. Rodrigo shifted uncomfortably, his earlier arrogance melting into something else, something that looked a lot like regret. He had wanted a spectacle. Instead, he had uncovered a truth too heavy to laugh at. Amanda tightened her grip on the chalk. Her voice sharpened once again. "And now, I fight not just for my daughter. I fight for the dignity that was stolen from me. And today, Professor, I will prove that I am still the same Amanda Silva you once praised but chose to forget." Amanda's eyes swept across the faces in the doorway. Professors, assistants, students, all silent, all caught between shame and awe. She pressed the chalk gently against the board, not yet writing, just holding. "My future collapsed in the span of months," she said, her voice steady but laced with quiet grief. "One moment, I was a top student with doors opening around the world. The next, I was expelled from those same doors, locked out by rules designed to protect privilege, not talent." Her words cut through the room like glass. She looked at Rodrigo, her stare unwavering. "I was 3 months from graduating. 3 months away from the degree that would have secured my life. And it was taken, not because I failed, not because I gave up, but because I dared to be vulnerable, because I carried a child." Professor Jose stepped forward, his voice thick with regret. "I remember the meetings. I remember the discussions about policy, and I remember your name being whispered in hallways, as the girl who vanished." Amanda nodded slowly. "Yes, I vanished. Not because I wanted to, but because this university forced me to." Her fingers tightened around the chalk. "Do you know what it feels like to see everything you've worked for crumble? To watch your name erased from lists, from classrooms, from memory, as if you never existed?" The silence was suffocating. Some professors looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Others blinked back tears, realizing they had played a part in her erasure, by action or by silence. Rodrigo's jaw clenched. He had wanted to humiliate her, but now it was his own reflection cracking before everyone's eyes. Amanda lifted her chin, her voice sharper now. "But here I am. Not erased, not broken. You wanted me invisible, Professor. Today, you will see me." She turned back to the board, the equation looming before her, waiting like destiny itself. Amanda exhaled slowly, the chalk still resting between her fingers. Her voice carried the quiet pain of years compressed into moments. "After losing my scholarship, I searched for any way back. I begged banks for loans, but without income or a guarantor, no one would help. Every door I knocked on was slammed in my face. My mother and I were left with nothing but survival." Her eyes swept the room, lingering on the polished floors, the marble stairs, the golden plaques of donors. "And so I did what I had to. I took jobs, waitress, shop assistant, maid, anything to keep my daughter fed, clothed, alive. Until one day fate brought me back here, not as a doctor, not as a researcher, but as a janitor." The weight of her words hung in the air. Professors shifted in discomfort, realizing the cruel irony. The same woman once celebrated in lecture halls now scrubbed their floors unseen. "I clean the very classrooms where I once stood as the brightest student," Amanda continued. "I erase equations I used to solve. I empty trash bins beside desks where I once dreamed." Her hand trembled, not from weakness but from the power of speaking what had been buried too long. "And every day I am reminded that talent means nothing if the world decides you are invisible. That no matter how brilliant you are, one misstep, one life choice can bury you under shame. Dr. Helena's voice cracked as she whispered, "Amanda, we failed you." Amanda turned, her eyes steady, almost gentle. "No, Professor, you didn't fail me. The system did." "And Rodrigo," her gaze cut like a blade toward the millionaire. "You stand as the face of that system, privilege without compassion, rules without mercy, success without justice." Rodrigo swallowed hard, his arrogance splintering under the weight of her truth. He had planned a spectacle of humiliation. Instead, he had unleashed a reckoning. Amanda faced the board again, her back straight, her resolve unshaken. "But I am not here today as your janitor. I am here as Amanda Silva, scholar, mother, fighter." The chalk touched slate. The first mark was no longer cleaning, it was reclaiming. The chalk paused in Amanda's hand as her eyes softened, her thoughts drifting to the one light that had never dimmed. "My daughter, Sophia," she said, her voice trembling with tenderness, "was born in 2009. I was only 22, alone, scared, with nothing left but her." A faint smile tugged at her lips, the kind born from equal parts love and sacrifice. "She is 15 now. Brilliant, determined, everything I dreamed she could be. Top of her class, just like I once was. She carries the fire I thought I had lost." Amanda's hand returned to her belly, a silent reminder of the child within her now. Raising her wasn't easy. There were nights I went hungry so she wouldn't, days I walked miles because I couldn't afford the bus fare. I took every insult, every humiliation, so she would never feel less than anyone. The professors stood silent, struck by the quiet power of her words. Helena's eyes shimmered with tears. Dr. Carlos folded his arms, hiding the guilt that weighed on him. "My strength is not mine alone," Amanda continued. "It comes from her. Every mop I pushed, every floor I scrubbed, every tear I held back. I did it because her eyes reminded me that giving up was not an option." Her voice grew sharper now, cutting through the tension like steel. "So when you laugh at me, Professor, when you see only a janitor with a swollen belly, remember this. You are not looking at failure. You are looking at a mother who refused to let life destroy her child's future." The silence in room 304 deepened, heavy and electric. Even Rodrigo, who moments ago smirked with cruelty, now shifted uneasily, unable to hold her gaze. Amanda tightened her grip on the chalk once more. "And today for Sophia, for the child I carry now, and for the woman I still am, I will prove myself again." She turned back to the equation, her eyes blazing. Amanda faced the crowd, chalk still poised, her voice gathering strength. "For 16 years, she began, I carried the weight of an injustice that was not just mine. It was a reflection of every student silenced by poverty, every dream crushed by rules written for the privileged." Her words echoed through the room like a sermon. Professors glanced at one another, some lowering their heads in shame. Even the marble walls of Mendez University seemed to shiver with the truth she spoke. "I lost everything because I was poor, because I was pregnant, because compassion was less important than money. 3 months away from graduation, and they erased me, as if 4 years of excellence meant nothing." Her voice broke for a moment, but she steadied it quickly. "Do you know what that does to a person? To be invisible in the very place where you once shined. To clean the floors you once walked proudly as a scholar. To be mocked daily by those who never bothered to know your story." A heavy silence filled the room. Helena's tears fell freely now. Dr. Jose shook his head, whispering, "We should have fought for you." Amanda's gaze hardened. "You didn't, and I paid the price." She turned her eyes to Rodrigo, who shifted uncomfortably, his arrogance stripped bare. "And you, Professor, heir of wealth and power, you laughed, you mocked, without even knowing who I was. You decided I was nothing." The weight of her words pressed down on him. His smirk was gone, replaced by pale silence. Amanda inhaled deeply, then raised the chalk with purpose. "But today, that ends. Today, I write not just numbers and formulas, I write a declaration. That brilliance cannot be erased. That dignity cannot be bought, and that truth will always rise. She turned back to the board, ready to begin the work that would silence every doubt. The room felt charged, every breath heavy with anticipation. Amanda's fingers tightened around the chalk, no longer trembling. For the first time since she had put on the janitor's uniform, she wasn't standing as a servant. She was standing as a challenger. Rodrigo leaned back against the desk, trying to mask his unease with arrogance. "So, prodigy," he sneered, his voice loud enough for the hall to hear, "show us, or admit you've been lying all along." Amanda turned her head slowly toward him, her gaze sharp and steady. "You think this is about lying? No. This is about survival, about a life I fought to protect when the world decided I wasn't worth saving." The professors shifted, caught between pity and awe. Whispers ran like ripples through the crowd, students pressing closer to the doorway to catch every word. Amanda drew in a deep breath, her eyes burning with fire. "I accept your challenge, but hear me well, Professor. This is not about 3 million reais. This is about my name, my dignity, my truth." She raised the chalk to the blackboard, the squeak of its tip against slate echoing like a gunshot in the tense silence. Each stroke felt deliberate, a reclaiming of power stolen from her years before. The audience leaned forward, breathless. Even Rodrigo's smirk faltered as the first symbols took shape under her steady hand. "This," Amanda declared, her voice rising, "is not a performance. This is proof. Proof that no uniform, no humiliation, no injustice can erase who I am." She turned briefly to the stunned professors and whispered almost like a vow, "Watch closely. You will remember this moment for the rest of your lives." Then she faced the equation fully, her posture straight, her presence commanding. Amanda Silva was no longer the janitor they thought they knew. She was the prodigy returning to claim her rightful place. Amanda stood before the blackboard, the same space where her brilliance had once earned applause instead of scorn. The chalk felt alive in her hand, and the silence around her was so deep it almost roared. Her eyes traced the equation from start to finish, every symbol sparking memories buried but never forgotten. Decay rates, molecular absorption, radioactive dosages. It wasn't foreign. It was familiar, like an old language she hadn't spoken in years but still carried in her blood. Rodrigo crossed his arms, forcing out a laugh that rang hollow. "Any day now. Don't keep us waiting." Amanda ignored him. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing, wasn't apologizing for existing. She breathed deeply, letting her mind settle into the rhythm it once knew so well. "This equation," she began, her voice calm and clear, "is about nuclear decay applied to medical treatment, radiation dosages for tumors, balancing danger and healing." The professors exchanged looks. Even the skeptical ones leaned closer. This wasn't the hesitant voice of a janitor. It was the confident cadence of a scholar. She pressed the chalk to the slate and wrote the first formula. The squeak echoed through the room, and gasps followed as her movements were precise, certain. Every line built on the last, weaving a solution none of Rodrigo's prize students had managed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "She knows it. She really knows it," Amanda continued, explaining each step as she wrote. Cesium-137, half-life of 30.17 years, energy emission of 0.662 MeV. Tissue absorption varies by density, bone, fat, muscle, all accounted for in the calculation. Her hand moved faster, her voice stronger, until the rhythm of chalk against board filled the room like a drumbeat of defiance. Behind her, Rodrigo's smirk was gone. He shifted his weight, eyes narrowing as the crowd leaned toward Amanda, not him. For the first time, he was no longer the center of the room. Amanda paused, turned her head slightly, and said with quiet fire, "I told you, Professor. You had no idea who you were dealing with." The chalk glided across the blackboard with a rhythm that sounded almost like music. Quick, confident, unstoppable. Amanda wasn't just solving an equation, she was awakening a part of herself the world had tried to bury. Her eyes burned with focus as numbers, Greek letters, and integrals flowed naturally from her hand. She didn't hesitate, didn't stumble. Each calculation came like second nature, as if her mind had never left the halls of academia. She remembers everything. "Doctor," Helena whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Dr. Carlos leaned forward, unable to look away. "Not just remembers, she's explaining the logic better than most professors." Amanda's voice carried steady authority. "Radiation dosage depends on more than numbers. It's about lives. Too little, the tumor wins. Too much, the patient suffers. Precision isn't optional. It's survival." The crowd stirred. Students whispered to each other, wide-eyed. Professors exchanged glances of disbelief. The janitor they had walked past 100 times without acknowledgement now commanded the room like a master of her craft. Amanda wiped a streak of chalk dust from her fingers and continued seamlessly. Now, applying decay equations to tissue density, she filled another section of the board, her symbols elegant, her reasoning flawless. Every line she drew was a strike against humiliation, every calculation a reclaiming of dignity. She was no longer erasing other people's brilliance, she was rewriting her own. Rodrigo's arms dropped from his chest. His smirk had vanished entirely. For the first time, sweat gathered at his temples. He had planned to humiliate Amanda, but the spectacle had turned against him. Amanda turned briefly, her gaze sharp as steel. "This is who I am. This is who I always was. You tried to bury me under a uniform, but genius doesn't vanish. It waits." Gasps filled the room, the crowd drawn into the fire of her words. And with that she pressed forward, diving into the most complex part of the equation, the part that would decide whether she left the room in shame or in triumph. The room was so still that the only sound was the steady squeak of chalk carving its way across the blackboard. Amanda's hand moved like it had never forgotten, each number falling into place, each formula aligning with perfect clarity. Dr. Helena leaned toward Dr. Carlos, whispering in disbelief, This is beyond our graduate students. She's not just remembering, she's teaching." Professor Jose, older and wiser, nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "I told you, Amanda Silva was never ordinary. She was a once-in-a-generation mind." More faculty gathered at the door, their expressions shifting from curiosity to awe. What had started as a cruel spectacle was becoming a revelation. The janitor, invisible for years, now held an entire university in the palm of her hand. Amanda paused for a moment, brushing chalk dust from her fingertips. She turned to the onlookers, her voice firm but calm. "This calculation isn't about pride. It's about precision. It's about lives. Real people who depend on doctors and researchers to get this right." Her words struck deeper than numbers could. The professors, many of whom had walked past her daily without acknowledgement, now saw not a cleaner, but the brilliant student they had lost. Rodrigo shifted uncomfortably, his posture stiff. The color drained from his face as he realized the truth he could no longer laugh away. Amanda wasn't bluffing. She was surpassing every expectation, dismantling his arrogance in front of his colleagues. She's really doing it," one professor muttered under his breath. Amanda turned back to the board, her hand steady, her voice unshakable. "This is not just an equation," she said, drawing the next integral with elegant precision. "This is my proof that I was never what you decided I was." A hushed awe filled the room. No one dared move, as if any sound might break the spell of watching a forgotten genius reclaim her throne. Rodrigo's throat tightened as he watched the board fill with flawless lines of logic. The confidence that had once fueled his mockery now drained from his body, leaving only a sick weight in his chest. Every stroke of Amanda's chalk was a mirror, reflecting his arrogance back at him. He had laughed at her, dismissed her, humiliated her in front of peers. And now in front of those same peers she was dismantling him with nothing but knowledge. Dr. Carlos folded his arms, his expression stern. "Rodrigo, you promised her 3 million reais, in front of witnesses." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Professors nodded in agreement, some with sharp looks that cut deeper than words. The power had shifted. The man who owned the building no longer owned the room. Rodrigo forced a strained smile, but it faltered. His eyes darted between the chalkboard and Amanda's unwavering focus. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted her to succeed or fail. Success meant humiliation for him. Failure meant confirming the system's cruelty. Either way, his mask was cracking. Amanda's voice carried over the silence, calm and deliberate. 3 million may sound like money to you, Professor, but to me, it is freedom. Freedom from humiliation. Freedom from invisibility. Freedom to give my children the future you thought I didn't deserve. Rodrigo swallowed hard. Her words pierced deeper than the equations. He could feel the professor's eyes on him, their judgment growing heavier with each second. The humiliation he had prepared for Amanda now wrapped itself tightly around his own shoulders. For years he had seen her as nothing more than background, a mop, a uniform, a shadow in the hallways. Now, standing before him, chalk in hand, she was larger than life, a woman who refused to stay buried. Rodrigo lowered his gaze, his arrogance finally bending under the weight of regret. Amanda's hand slowed as she filled the last corner of the blackboard, the final numbers connecting like pieces of a puzzle, falling perfectly into place. She stepped back, chest rising and falling, her face glowing with a quiet fire. The board was full, formulas, calculations, proofs, all written with the precision of someone who had lived and breathed this knowledge. A hush fell so heavy that even the hum of the lights above seemed distant. Then Amanda spoke, her voice low but firm, cutting through the silence. This was never about 3 million reais. Money cannot repay 16 years of stolen dignity. This is about truth, about recognition, about proving that brilliance cannot be erased by a uniform or buried by arrogance. Her gaze swept the room from the professors with downcast eyes to Rodrigo, pale and trembling. I am Amanda Silva. I was the best student this university ever had. You erased me once. You will not erase me again. Dr. Helena wiped a tear from her cheek, whispering, "She's right. We failed her." Dr. Carlos nodded solemnly. And she has just proven more than any exam ever could. The crowd remained breathless, caught between shame and awe. Students at the back stared wide-eyed, realizing they had just witnessed history, an act of defiance more powerful than any lecture. Rodrigo's lips parted, but no words came. His arrogance, once his shield, had shattered completely. The promise of 3 million weighed on him like a stone, but heavier still was the realization that he had tried to destroy someone he should have honored. Amanda laid the chalk gently on the tray. She no longer looked like a janitor, nor even just a student. She stood like a conqueror, not of wealth, not of status, but of herself, of the story that had tried to bury her. She turned to the crowd one last time, her voice rising with finality. This was not a bet. This was justice. And today dignity has won. The room erupted, not in laughter, not in whispers, but in stunned, reverent silence.